The main difference between this fresh scan and the older one is that since Gareth is now connected to Visser 1's mind and Eva has always been there, both characters appear as physical presences within these memories, as observers and commentators. It could be worse. It could have been a couple of wisecracking robots riffing on our memories. What we see are moments of Visser 1 enjoying her time on Earth. She started up a dialogue with Allison, swapping Yeerk biological data for human history, despite it being easy enough to just extract that information by force. Essem had found himself enjoying his human life as Hildy, and the two of them, or rather the four of them, had started to form strong bonds. They even had a candlelit lobster dinner. Gareth stared at me, grim. You experienced human emotions that were not derived from the host. It was you, Edris, feeling a sort of exaggerated sympathy for Hildy, and for Essem within him. Can't be, Eva whispered. You were falling in love with him. You? Despite Visser 1's claims that this was all just a part of researching humans, the reality is perfectly clear. Visser 1 became very, very human. So let's see how that happened, shall we? Let's see what it is about Yeerks that made Visser 1 obtain human emotions. What made Visser 3 such a jerk? What makes the Yeerks what they are? Let's start with gender. First, it's important to make the distinction between the terms sex and gender. Sex is typically referring to the physical biology of our reproductive anatomy. Sex deals with the penises and the vaginas and the prostates and the uteruses. Gender, on the other hand, is a matter of personal identification and lifestyle. Gender is when we say, I am a man, or I am a woman, or I am something in between. Yeerks do not have typical binary sexes. Yeerk reproduction consists of 3 Yeerks fusing together into one mass, which then breaks apart into hundreds of little grubs, killing the 3 parents in the process. By extension, it would make sense that Yeerks shouldn't have any sense of gender. Yet by this point, the Yeerks have long been using gendered pronouns and addressing each other and themselves as male or female. The reason for this is that Yeerks adopt a gender identity based on their experience controlling gendered hosts. Consider that it seems that human beings are the first species, outside of Andalites, with distinct gender identities. Taxons have a hive-style reproduction, and Hork-Bajir males and females are distinct mostly through reproductive organs and an arbitrary number of horns. They are otherwise physically identical, which also suggests being culturally identical. In evolutionary studies, the fewer differences between male and female body types suggest more equal responsibility in child-rearing than survival. Those beings are called sexually monomorphic species, the poster child of which are the gibbons. So yes, human beings are the most gendered species the Yeerks have come across. It's kind of amazing to realize that for the Yeerks, excluding Visser 3, gender identity has only really existed for less than a decade. But then again, the Yeerks as a present culture are mind-bogglingly young. It's only been 30 years since the Yeerks first met the Andalites and started their invasion across space. Almost every bit of cultural identity, every law and governing system and social grace was created in that 30-year period. The only persisting element from the Yeerks' pre-Andalite days is the Council of 13. And these books use the iconography of monks, wizards, and secret societies to code the council as a mystical cult. They may even have theological origins, though nothing in the books confirm this. They maintain control by withholding information from people. By extension, it would suggest that information is a commodity among Yeerks, perhaps the only currency they've ever had. Being blind, deaf, and weak, anything that can be obtained through the infestation of a host is considered valuable. Even something we take for granted like sensory information or even gender identities. In effect, the Yeerks are like sponges, absorbing what information they come across and making it part of their personal identities, though often with such greediness that this information can be misunderstood and warped. I believe that's what happened with Visser 3. After infesting Aloran, Visser 3 became the first to have contact with Andalite pride, aggression, and xenophobia. And these things began to warp and gradually change the more methodical, calm Visser 3 into the maniacal loony we see today. We see these tendencies towards Yeerk's absorbing personalities in other characters. Aftran admitted to childish feelings of weakness and inadequacy while controlling a child, and Taylor took on so much of her host's personhood that she constantly confused her host's history with her own. 30 years is not enough time for a society to get all this information worked out into something workable, especially when they're taking over a new species every decade or so. The Yeerks are not so much evil as they are an immature race, with all the sense of confusion and entitlement and aggression of a 4-year-old child. It is telling that the two most evil individuals among them, Visser 1 and Visser 3, are those who have more well-rounded experiences. They are more mature than most, more beholden to that sense of universal morality. By learning to love humanity, to love other individuals, to find a gender identity and newly maternal instincts once Allison Kimms becomes pregnant, this gives Visser 1 the perspective that makes her a formidable foe now. As the first to infest a human being, she is always ahead of the curve on how to manipulate and use humans. And these new ideas, new emotions, they give her new, out-of-the-box ways of thinking, able to play to motivation and needs and desire and vices in ways that no other Yeerk has been able to devise. Visser 1 begs that all of this was just a way to learn about humanity and find its weakness for invasion. But the truth is that all those advantages were after the fact. Visser 1 did these things because it is in the nature of a Yeerk to do them. And with that, the Yeerks are finally, completely defined. Gareth is convinced that Visser 1 is no Andalite sympathizer, but is still probably a traitor. We watch Visser 1's memories of her and Essam discussing the faulty Kandrona machine on their ship. The only way for them to survive would be to make contact with the Yeerk forces, but they found it hard to reconcile their lives as Yeerks with their new lives as humans, on Earth with 2 twin children. The two of them made a pact that, whatever happened, the children would be safe. Gareth ends the memory broadcast there, and this should be enough evidence to convict Visser 1. But the trial doesn't end as it should. All awaited Gareth's statement. For a long time he was silent, staring at nothing. Then at last he shook his head and apologized. "I'm sorry for the delay," he said. "We will now proceed with Visser 1's statement." I stared. What? Continue? From what point? Why? Why? I was convicted. I was guilty. "There's another game being played here," my host said. "Another game altogether." No, I argued. "He's just waiting, But I didn't have an explanation. It was absurd. I wasn't an Andalite spy, but a traitor? Yes, or had been. "He's hoping for a way out," Eva said. "You were not supposed to be convicted. They want a way out. You have to find it. You have to discredit Visser 3. Visser 3 presses about the fate of the children, but before Visser 1 can respond, Eva realizes that Visser 3 almost certainly has the children somewhere and will bring them out if Visser 1 lies and says she killed them. Visser 1 instead says the children were given to other humans to raise, and Visser 3's visual deflation proves that Eva was right. Eva is not so much on Visser 1's side as she realizes the ramifications of Visser 1 losing the trial. So for the time being, the two of them are on the same team. Visser 1 manages to convince the consul to take a recess, and she is escorted to a dining area in the Yeerk pool for food. Visser 1 isn't interested in eating, though. Instead, she finds a controller with a cell phone, bumps into her, and pickpockets it. She then goes to the bathroom and, finally hidden from Visser 3, calls the only person who can help her now. Marco. Yes, the call that ended 35 the proposal. She tells Marco that he and the rest of the Animorphs need to make a presentation in front of the council, and gives him directions of a way into the Yeerk pool. "You'll do it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Mom, I know you can hear me. I don't know if I can save you. You understand that, right? I'll do what's right. I'll do what I have to do." It was his only show of emotion. His voice cracked when he said, "Mom." "I know you will. I love you," Eva said, silent, a prisoner in her own skull. "Marco, your mother loves you," I said. But if I'd been expecting him to soften, I got the opposite result. "I know my mother loves me, Visser," he said. "And let me make one thing clear. There's no deal between us, you and me, Yerk. I'll kill you for what you've done to her and my dad. Count on that." He hung up. So the trial continues, and, wow, we've been doing this for a while now. You guys want to take a break? Maybe go to the bathroom? Get a snack? No? Okay. Anyway, Visser 1 recounts contacting the Yerk forces from Earth and announcing the discovery of a Class 5 species, as well as the details of her secret invasion and the new front she has just created, the Sharing. However, Essam did not take well to this at all, and he managed to overpower her. He managed to talk her out of Allison's head and into Visser 1's second host, a man named Lord David Altman, who served as the face of the Sharing. Essam and Allison took the children and went on the run, Essam knowing that he'll die in 3 days, but it's a sacrifice he'd be willing to make for the sake of the children. Visser 3 continues to push that Visser 1 cared for the children, and that the slow invasion of Earth was a way to keep them safe. Visser 1 denies it, and Visser 3 finally brings in her son, a young boy named Darwin. Visser 3 gives Visser 1 a gun and says, "Hey, if you don't care about the kid, then, well, you shouldn't have a problem with killing him." Visser 1 finds herself against the wall again, and despite her personal feelings and Eva screaming for her to stop, Visser 1 prepares to pull the trigger. When suddenly, the Animorphs attack, right in front of the council. Visser 3 roars and flails in confusion as bears and tigers and Andalites suddenly appear and whip up some mayhem. And hey, Visser 1 is armed now, so she feigns attempting to shoot the Animorphs to make it clear she's not on their side. Marco enters the fray in Gorilla Morph and knocks Visser 1 unconscious. She awakens in a tunnel hidden behind a hologram, probably from an off-camera Eric King. Marco stands demorphed in front of her and is in complete control. Visser 1 can't offer any threats as Marco threatens to kill her if she doesn't leave his mother. With Axe's tail blade to her throat, she has no choice but to comply. Visser 1 is left blind and deaf and at the mercy of the Animorphs, but is surprised to find herself re-entering Eva not long after, only to be rendered unconscious. She's still able to access the memories of the stuff she missed. It seems Eva told Marco and the rest of the Animorphs the political situation down here, that if Visser 3 wins and takes control of the Earth invasion, he'll begin mass murder, destroying cities from orbit and killing billions. Eva knows that Visser 1 must win today, and is willing to become a controller again to accomplish this. It harkens back to the very first book, at the disgust the Animorphs had for voluntary controllers, now reflected here in all its complex reality. Because now Eva has become a voluntary controller in order to save the world. God damn, but it gets the tears moving. The Animorphs debate this for a bit. There's no clear answer here. Maybe Visser 3 being in charge would be a good thing, considering he's kind of an idiot. But finally Marco makes the call and honors her mother's wishes, and Visser 1 is returned to her host. This is followed by a flashback of the early days of the Sharing, and Visser 1 setting things up and getting her first voluntary controller, proving to herself that this system could work in the first place. Visser 1 is found and brought back to the trial. It turns out that after all of this conflict, the Council have reached a conclusion for both Visser 1 and Visser 3, but request to find out exactly what happened to Essam. It turns out that Visser 1 tracked him down near the end of his 3 days, confronting him at a hospital. When the Yerk was halfway out of Hildy's head, Visser 1 grabbed him and tried to pull him out, but ended up tearing him in half. The fact that half of a decomposing Yerk is still attached to Hildy's brain accounts for his present insanity. Hey, you drink too. Visser 1 then killed Allison and abandoned the children at the hospital, severing her final ties to Earth. Finally, the invasion could begin. With that, the Council can finally lay sentence on both Vissers. Visser 1 and 3, you have jointly or individually committed a dozen death penalty offenses. Visser 3, you lied to and manipulated the Council. Visser 1, you clearly committed numerous death penalty offenses during a period early in your invasion of Earth. You are both condemned to death by Kandrona starvation. I felt nothing. It was what I had known must happen. Death. The most terrible death we know. Both sentences suspended. Yes, both are found guilty, and both are not punished. Gareth rationalizes this as they remain too important of leaders to get rid of. They don't have anyone else to run operations on Earth, so Visser 3 is given the task, but forbids him from massive destruction. Not because the Council agrees with Visser 1's tactics, but because the Andalites are building up forces and are currently deciding which Yeerk-invaded planet to send ships to. The Council wants to keep the invasion of Earth under the radar. Visser 1, in turn, is sent to take over operations on a planet called Inati. If either of them fail, their lives will be forfeit. Eva is torn at this. She had wanted to prevent Visser 3 being in charge of the Earth invasion, and now she can't even have peace in death. Visser 1, on the other hand, sees this as a new beginning. Her trial by fire is over. Post-book follow-up. You guys still with me? Hey, I see you playing Minesweeper over there. We're just about done. Yes, that was a lot to digest, and it's hardly a definitive analysis of this book. This book is incredibly dense. There is so much history, characterization, themes, and ideas packed into its 193 pages that I could easily make a video that's twice this length. It's clear that this is a story that Kay Applegate and Michael Grant really wanted to tell. Visser 1, a character they really wanted to define and write for. And that passion really comes through. The vocabulary is even bumped up a notch to reflect Visser 1's intelligence. I'm a grown-ass man, and I was still Googling words as I read this. In my opinion, Visser is the last great Animorphs book. There are still some good Animorphs books, some interesting Animorphs books, but nothing that screams, this story had to be told. As such, this is the final book in the series to get my highest rating. I give Visser a 10 out of 10.